It feels like, especially now since the market is like in search of a new narrative, it seems like a lot of people are landing on Deepin as that new narrative. And like the amount of times I see on Twitter, and these are like, other investors, traders, and so on, talking about, Deepin could be that next narrative. I'm actually like pretty aligned on that, especially because I think the market wants a project or a sector that's actually producing real value, like touching the real world.
I know you're spending a lot of time on Bittensor these days over at OSS Capital. So new role over there, which is super exciting. And just, it sounds like laser focused on Bittensor. So I think most of our audience is probably pretty generally aware, it's a decentralized AI project, but getting maybe a level deeper than that, like what are the latest interesting developments going on in the Bittensor ecosystem? Sami, thank you for joining me here in person. You're a DePIn OG. We're old podcast co-hosts on the Proof of Coverage podcast. So we're at this DePIN summit. It's 6 hours long, maybe even 8 hours if you include the happy hour. Hundreds of people here. Mahesh's kind of main talk was just packed out there, standing room only. So I want to ask you, like, would you say DePIN's made it this cycle in terms of being very relevant, being very popular, and just the number of kind of companies and projects that have launched?
First of all, thanks for having me. It feels really good to be back, just like speaking with you, and I miss the podcast days. And who knows? I think we're going to be back soon, hopefully.
Back soon for Iris.
But being here is amazing, especially since I was at the first DePIN Summit. And this is completely different, where, the first DePIN Summit was basically just a single hotel conference room that was like meeting after panel after panel. And this feels like a legit conference where there's like 2 different stages. There's a room for like projects to have demos, and the turnout is actually amazing, like a lot larger than the first one as well. Like I got pulled out of Mahesh's talk to come do this, but like I was like, damn, this guy's killing it. He was just so influential, and like I could tell everybody was just kind of glued and like really listening to what he had to say. But it sort of does feel like Deepin has, I wouldn't say it's made it, but like it's on the path to making it. My conviction continues to grow. Like my conviction has gotten a little shaky. Like I've never thought that Deepin was going away, but there's like a period of time where like there wasn't as much interesting activity, and like this had to do with like the bear market and so on. But it feels like, especially now since the market is like in search of a new narrative, it seems like a lot of people are landing on Deepin as that new narrative. And like the amount of times I see on Twitter people talking about like, and these are like, other investors, traders, and so on, talking about, Deepin could be that next narrative. I'm actually like pretty aligned on that, especially because I think the market wants a project or a sector that's actually producing real value, like touching the real world. And Deepin is that. No more. I mean, there'll always be meme coins and scams and so on, but like Deepin is almost this movement to like, okay, it's time to get serious with crypto, build something that real people can actually utilize and like contribute back to the world by building like public infrastructure.
Yeah, no, 100%. Definitely agree. Growing conviction. I know you're spending a lot of time on Bittensor these days over at OSS Capital. So new role over there, which is super exciting. And just, it sounds like laser focused on Bittensor. So I think most of our audience is probably pretty generally aware, it's a decentralized AI project, but getting maybe a level deeper than that, like what are the latest interesting developments going on in the Bittensor ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk for hours about Bittensor, and the nice thing now is like I'm full-time Bittensor essentially. And there's still a lot of like misunderstanding and like confusion about what Bittensor does. And that's actually what my talk is going to be about here, is like dispelling a lot of the Bittensor FUD. But I have very strong conviction, and I can confidently say that I think the only project in the crypto AI space that is actually producing something at this point in time is Bittensor. And like I might catch a lot of heat for that, but like I appreciate every other founder that's building in this space within crypto and AI. But when you look at the actual projects that are producing something at this point in time, it's only subnets within Bittensor. So the simple way to think of Bittensor is like a launch pad for AI networks, right? And again, people don't know like what's actually going on within Bittensor, which is probably a flaw from the community, something that we can do better on. But there are, several data networks just to start that are doing chunking, data labeling, embedding, scraping, storage. Then you have like networks or subnets that are focused on model creation. So they're doing they're pre-training models, they're fine-tuning models, different niches like training text-to-speech models, role-play LLMs, models that are good for solving mathematic problems, and then a whole assortment of different subnets, such as like these subnets that are focused on solving research problems. So you can think of like protein folding, optimization subnets. There are so many like interesting like rabbit holes happening where like I could talk for days. But the reason I like am still here too at this DePIN Summit is obviously I believe in DePIN, but I also believe that like Bittensor will continue to play a role within DePIN. So as far as like Bittensor becoming a platform for the digital resource networks within DePIN, so the compute, the storage, the bandwidth, and maybe one day the physical resource networks, right? Like maybe we can get something similar to HiveMap or Demo or Helium that eventually launch. Because at the end of the day, like Bittensor is just this platform for writing incentive mechanisms. And what is DePIN? It's like using incentive mechanisms to get people to create things in the real world.
Yeah. I mean, that's what always impressed me about how big the vision is. I remember when we had Jake and all on the pod, and just very, very visionary founders. And like, I guess, maybe it's not even just a crypto XAI project, right? It sounds like it could be applied to kind of just incentive systems generally, which is crazy.
Exactly. It's just like a incentive distribution platform at the end of the day.
Yeah. So, I mean, definitely excited to see where that goes. And you will be my Bittensor KOL, Bittensor, just person that keeps me in the loop with what's going on there. Last question for you is like, there's typically two broad buckets of people in crypto, right? There's the operators and there's the investors. And you've kind of done both at this point. You were doing research at Masari on the operating side. Now you're on the investing side at OSS Capital. So, what's that journey been like? And, what advice would you have for people on the operating side that are like, oh, I'd love to work in crypto VC? How did your path work out there?
Yeah, so I think my experience is a little different. First of all, I was super blessed to get into Masari and be on a team where I could follow whatever was like interesting to me and like write on that. And so that's what sort of led to DePIN, because I was able to explore like whatever was interesting and network a lot with different investors, founders in the space, people like you. And transitioning to VC, I guess like I'm not your typical VC where I'm like focused on a wide assortment of different projects. Like I'm mainly focused on the ecosystem fund. OSS Capital in general is focused on like open source software, but like my main objective right now is like on Bittensor. It could change, to the broader crypto AI space later on, but Masari taught me a lot, like being an analyst, on like how to just like, it sounds cheesy, but like network and how just like learning how to develop relationships is one of the biggest like skill sets in life. And also, if I had to like give a recommendation to somebody like looking to break into the space, my suggestion would be specialized. When I was at Masari, like I went all into DePIN because like I realized I didn't have an edge when it came to like DeFi or social or gaming, and like I wasn't really that interested in it. And so like you have to have conviction about something that like no one else is really thinking about at that time. Like I would say I took a pretty big risk at Masari because I just put my whole like reputation and also pretty much career on DePIN at the time when it was like me, you, Sal, Mahesh, and like a few other, obviously you had all the great founders like the Helium team, Akash, and so on. But like there weren't many people backing us, or just like,
definitely,
it was a meme, and maybe it still is sort of a meme, but like no one took it seriously. And so like having the conviction to be like, I think something useful is going to come out of this. It's like believe in something,
Believe
in something.
Yes.
And so that's what I would tell somebody is just find out where you can contribute something of value, develop like expertise, like using your whatever specific skill set you have, whether it's like, analyzing vibes or just communicating with people or like being able to go really deep down the rabbit hole and like understand the technical aspects of a project and just see what you can do with that and just be useful to other people, I guess. Because you don't want to make things transactional, but like being useful to other people will like help you in the long run as well. So
for sure. Yeah. Provide value before you look to extract it.
Exactly.
You gotta make a name for yourself.
Yeah.
Well, cool. I think that's it. Appreciate you coming on, man. This has been awesome. We'll do an episode soon, I think, Iris.
Yeah.
We'll figure out scheduling for that, but yeah, I really appreciate it.
All right, man.
Thanks for listening to the Proof of Coverage podcast. We post new episodes Mondays and Wednesdays, interviewing the best DePIN and crypto founders out there. If you like this episode, follow us on Twitter @CoverageProved and all other platforms, including YouTube and Spotify @Proof of Coverage Podcast. Thank you.